Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about some tips that I have for in-class discussions. So a few times now in my comments of my videos, different people have asked about or talked about or given their own kind of perspective on in-class discussions as an English major. In my 5 things you need to know before becoming an English major or something like that, I'll link it in the description of this video. But in that video, a few people have said you also forgot to mention how much you need to be able to discuss the poetry or literature or whatever it is on discussion posts online or in person or even just through your papers, but you do need to be able to discuss what you're talking about and talk about it in a group setting, whether that's one-on-one, in a small group, or in an entire classroom. So I thought that I would talk about a few tips that I have for when you're in those situations, specifically about in-class discussions where you're in class, you're talking together. Right now these discussions tend to be happening over Zoom, but even when you're in person, these things will be very helpful. So let's just get into it. So the first thing that's really important is to listen to what everybody else in the discussion is saying. Sometimes I'm going into a class and maybe maybe it was a little bit of a confusing poem and I really only had the time and energy to read it once. And so I've got a general idea, but I'm kind of going in lacking inspiration on a discussion topic or things that I would pull out of it. Or maybe I read it a few times and there's something about it that I'm not getting, or I'm getting certain things, but there's other stuff to be discussed that I'm not catching or I didn't get on when I read it myself. So when you're in a class discussion, it's really, really beneficial to pay attention to what other people are bringing up in the discussion. And what I like to do is, especially like a literature class, I'll have my book open in front of me to whatever we're discussing. And as people are talking, I try to look at what section they're discussing and kind of see what they mean looking at exactly what they're talking about. And that can help me kind of see it in a different way and hear it better. And a lot of the times I'll go into a class feeling a little limited in what I want to discuss or just really having no idea what I want to discuss, and somebody will say something and it like triggers something in my mind, and I can go through and look and say, oh, you know what, that makes me think of this. Or they'll bring up one instance where the poet or the author or whatever does something and I can go, oh, you know what, that also, there's something else. And I can find another instance and build onto that discussion and add to it. And as these discussions are happening, whether it's your professor talking, whether it's just fellow classmate, or whether it's you saying something, it's really beneficial to try and like take notes on what's happening, whether you're physically taking notes or you're kind of doing it mentally. Find some way to just be cataloging or pulling together what's being discussed so that you can add to it, or even if you're not adding to the exact thing that's being said, if you're bringing something new into the conversation, it is really interesting to see if you can tie it into the other ways that the discussion is naturally flowing. Another really helpful thing to do kind of before you are in the class, in the discussion, is when you have the original reading assignment. And sometimes professors will like give you a reading and say, let's just discuss this. That hasn't happened too much for me in college, but even when that does happen, usually you're given time to like read the piece before the discussion is started. So when you're initially reading that piece, and if you're rereading it, whenever you're reading it, try to annotate. Maybe you're annotating onto it and straight onto the piece that you're reviewing, or on a separate sheet of paper, take some notes and just write down what comes up for you while you're reading it. Sometimes, if you look at my tips for discussion posts video, I talk some about analyzing pieces and how I annotate when I'm working, but it can be very simple things from, oh, that's an interesting sentence, because it'll at least like bring your brain back to it when you're having your discussion. Or, I mean, sometimes I just put a star next to a line that I want emphasis on, or a word or whatever. Mark rhyme scheme, or alliteration, or anything really. You know, mark whatever kind of sticks out to you, and if you're reading it multiple times, continue to do that. You can make it look messy. As long as it's not a textbook that you can't write in or something, then you can always do that on a separate sheet of paper. But when you're taking the notes and you're having your brain kind of be active in that way while you're doing your assignment, it makes it a lot easier to pull things up into the conversation when you're doing that in-class discussion. And then the last thing, if it's possible or if it's appropriate, it will depend on the discussion that you're having and the piece of what you're kind of bringing up. But I would definitely recommend, if you can, to bring some direct quotes and support from your reading into what you're saying. So not just, I found it interesting that the poet was like this, but maybe I found it interesting in this part of the poem when the poet said this and it made me think XYZ, and then you kind of lead into your discussion, because it has that support with it that kind of shows where everything ties together, and it just supports what you're saying. It adds some extra emphasis and some extra credibility. I hope this was helpful for you guys. If you have any other questions, please let me know in the comments down below. I would be happy to talk about this some more, and if you have any other videos you'd like me to film, again, please in the comment section. I love to hear what you guys want to see. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoy, and I will see you guys next week. Bye!